you have to be curious. It used to make great leaders. I mean, I think it makes all sorts of things. Someone talked about, I think Steven Spielberg said that the reason he's a great director is because he never stopped being like a child, right? With the wonder and curiosity. In the work that I do, and I don't know other industries, so I have to focus on what we do. Curiosity is something that drives innovation. And before, I think things change slower, so you didn't necessarily need to keep being curious. Great leadership is always wondering.
Welcome to the Information Week Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor Zhao Pierre Ruth. In today's episode, we are talking about succession planning as AI changes what it means to be a C-suite tech leader. What it means to be a CTO, a CIO, a chief data officer, and other roles continues to evolve and change as AI becomes more and more embedded and involves with many ecosystems. And not only has this technology shifted operational needs in terms of skills, the chain of command and leadership structures can also be upended. So what are your succession plans as AI changes what it means to be a C-suite tech leader? For today's episode, we are joined by Alex Lisle, who's a CTO for Reality Defender. Alex, good to be seeing you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And we're also joined by Hui Zhang, co-founder and chief technology officer for Conviva. Hui, good to be seeing you as well.
Glad to be here.
Okay, great. All right. Wait, Alex, let's talk about how both of you or each of you frame your current and even your upcoming responsibilities right now in your roles compared with how things were maybe 1 or 2 years ago when AI was maybe just starting to, gain the some of the early momentum, or even just like before that kind of, rush that happened of attention that we're seeing now. Hui, if you could actually lead us off with your perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are really two aspects of it. One is we're a technology company. So the question here is AI fundamentally changed the entire ecosystem. And what does it mean for our product, how we build our product? How does it fit into our customers' value? Because they are AI, going to be AI centric company also. So that's one aspect to it. I think the second aspect is really about internally, how do we, adopt AI first methodology such that we can really leverage the best of AI and also best of people. And, I think the biggest challenge is AI is moving faster than human can even adapt. And I think that's for both aspects. So I think that those are the two class of problems. I think that in this new AI age, the senior leader, in particular technical leaders like CTO, like me, we have to think it through.
Gotcha. Alex, how from your perspective, how has it changed your responsibilities and what you're looking at?
It's an interesting question, right? I think the first thing is to level set, right? There are two ways to... There's sort of what was alluded to, which is the first one is like, how does your product change? How does your product offering change? What does that look like? And then there's the other part of it, which is like the internal side of AI, right? From the product side, for us, because we're a deep tech company, it doesn't necessarily change fundamentally any of those sorts of aspects of what we offer, right? We're not like one of the sorts of generic intelligence platforms and things like that. So while it was interesting, and also the fact we're an AI manipulation company, so we kind of are used to talking about AI for a long period and looked at it on that side of things. And so from that side of things, I don't think a huge amount changed. And also, I think, the way that we've always viewed this is like, what is the problem that we are solving for our customer, and is that problem still there? And fundamentally, that problem shifted because there's LLMs involved. And I think that the answer to that ultimately was no. Then there's the other side of things, which is like, how does your estate change, right? What does that look like? There are some fundamental seismic shifts that LLMs have produced into production workflow. Companies, there used to be whole dedicated internal teams that plugged certain SaaS products together to give you analytics, things like that. Now becomes all vibe coded, right? All that sort of stuff. There are an explosion of internal tools that was just unthinkable before LLMs, things along those lines. And then there's the other aspect, which is like, how does your development environment change? And I think that's where there's sort of understanding AI in sort of two paradigms, which is one, which is AI is a tool. So, hey, my developers are using this as a tool. It's a very useful tool of theirs, but it's still a tool of theirs, and the code they write is ultimately theirs. Even if mostly it's AI trained, how does that fundamentally change? And for us, the decision was made that, hey, I don't mind you using AI tools. You use whatever you need to be as productive as you can, but ultimately you're responsible for what you produce and what the pull requests are. So you have to still understand what you're producing. And so there was that aspect. There's the other aspect, which I think people haven't really fully comprehended, which is what does it look like when you don't intermix an LLM environment with your developers? Because fundamentally, before LLMs, the most expensive thing was your developer, and you made sure your developer was the maximum productivity, which meant they were the nexus of the world, and they had access to all sorts of things they shouldn't have access to, because you wanted them to be as efficient as possible. So what happens when LLMs become your production environment, where you're not commingling with people, and what the environment looks like? And I think that's the thing that's going to change a lot of things in the next 4 or 5 years, and how that looks like and what an LLM development environment looks like without people is going to be interesting. I mean, we are beginning to get there with the loop management things and things like that, but I think that's where we still haven't seen the impact and what that means. And I think that's going to fundamentally shift how development works in interesting ways. Right now, AI is a tool, it's a powerful tool, but you still have the gatekeeper, which is the engineer. Will that always be the case is going to be an interesting question.
Gotcha. So there's some talk that traditional tech roles, as they've been defined over the past, decades or so, are going to go extinct in terms of, certain roles merging into each other, being absorbed. Have those kind of discussions been had within your organizations? Is that something or is it something you say that's not definitively not happening within your organization in terms of the implementation of AI?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go first. I think 100%. I think is a profoundly change, at least industry I'm aware of, and also profoundly change how Conviva operates. I think from there's an organization perspective, there's an individual perspective. I think from the organization perspective, I think that AI allows sort of you dramatically can expand your expertise. So you can you have people you can be an expert in something. I'm an embedded system expert. I'm a Rust programming expert. I'm a front end expert. I'm a sort of a document writing expert. So and now what happens is you can be able to pick up them very fast with AI expanding on this. You can be a generalist. Used to be you have a your focus is one small area. You can go miles deep. Now I think what's happening is you can have people who have covered on very wide areas and also go certain depths, and with AI extended to even deeper. So what it means is, specifically, if you think about like a product building, right? Nowadays we have AI pods that, the traditional role of product managers used to be they write a PRD, they work with the engineers and work with designers. Now the product managers can literally living in the code. They can spec out the product, and then that artifact, it can be passed on to engineers. In fact, in most cases, it can build almost a prototype immediately, and the engineers will continue to harden it on the same artifact. So you don't go to the code is the artifact for all the participants. So and the traditional roles of what is a UX designer, what is a UI developer, what is a documentation person, what's a front-end engineer, what's a back-end engineer. I think it's all got very blurred. I think the new way in industry, also in Conviva, we call it builders. The builders are, the more customer-facing builders. That's the product manager. And then they define the business value. And then everybody is involved in the building. And we want all the engineer to be extremely familiar with the business context. Used to be, because of productivity gain, used to be, let's say you have a 2-piece team working on a sprint of 2 weeks, just for sake of arguments, let's say 10 people, 10 days. Now, if you can accelerate by 10x, again, just for round numbers, now all of a sudden you say, well, one person can get it done in a day, or 2 people can get it done in a day. So you cut down the communication overhead dramatically. But also, it changes, because it used to be you have a first couple of days, you talk about requirements, everybody get on the same page. Now you want to deliver something very, very rapidly. So the cadence, I would say 2x or 3x, definitely order of magnitude, the efficiency gain, fundamentally change how you operate, both at the human level and also at the artifact level, the technology tool chain level.
Alex, how about from your perspective?
It's nuanced, right? I mean, there's some things that I said which I entirely agree with. I think some things like, when you used to worry about documentation first, things along those lines, you're now creating documentation primarily that's going to be consumed by an LLM. There's some aspects around that. The fundamentals still haven't changed. There is this idea, hey, you don't mean subject matter expert, but you kind of do. But it was more computer science and computer engineering, which is like, I need to know why I'm using a hash map. I need to know why I'm using a linked list. Before, you didn't necessarily need to know these things because you would go use an API which did them. Now an LLM makes design choices. You have to understand what those design choices are and if those are appropriate for what you're creating. We haven't reached where the market's going. And if the market goes to this idea of how do I not replace 1 or 2 developers, but what's it look like when you have 400 or 500 developers in a totally LLM-based environment, that's going to change things, and that's going to be interesting when that happens. But right now, I think stuff hasn't changed in the same way. And I'll also say, if you look at the big AI companies, they aren't reducing their development footprint. In fact, they're doing the exact opposite. They're vastly expanding their development footprint. And I think that tells you an awful lot about what development practices are. If the ones who espouse the change don't seem to be following what they're espousing, I think you can derive a lot from that sort of information.
Are either of you looking at or already providing any kind of like in-house training or education to kind of make sure that your potential successors have the updated skills and knowledge and foresight that you're looking for them to kind of carry on into, whatever potential candidates for the future, leadership, tech leadership within your organizations? Have you been looking at that at all?
I'll just go first if I don't. So I don't think that this is a necessary change. We always, in any organization, you all need to have a sort of a talent succession plan. You want to, groom the next generation leaders. I think at least in Conviva, that's the case. Now, in the AI age, the leadership, gets sharpened in some, leadership. I think there are many commonalities, but there are, in the AI age, the things that are even more important, I would call it, is this ability to, I agree with Alex about knowing the fundamental, but also high slope of learning. The world is moving so fast that you really need to keep up. And that's the slope, we say that, the high slope person that's one aspect. Even we always love high slope people but in the AI age, it's become even more important.
You have to be curious. It used to make great leaders. I mean, I think it makes all sorts of things. Someone talked about, I think Steven Spielberg said that the reason he's a great director is because he never stopped being like a child, right? With the wonder and curiosity. In the work that I do, and I don't know other industry, so I have to focus on what we do. Curiosity is something that drives innovation. And before, I I think things change slower, so you didn't necessarily need to keep being curious. Great leadership is always wondering and always being open, and the understanding that, oh, that's cool, but then also understanding, well, what problems does that solve? What problems does that introduce? Having that curiosity drives, and great leaders and great software engineers and programmers and most people in creatives have that wonder. And I think you need that more than ever.
So right now we have this emphasis on AI as it relates to leadership succession. Do you think that we could ever just get to a point where we're talking less about the emphasis on AI and just focusing on but getting back to just talking about general technology leadership within organizations? And with this succession, I'm just looking back at the idea that we are no longer talking about web gurus or internet mavens as we were, a few decades ago. So, or we potentially go through this period right now, but just the future succession will just get back to a focus on, good, solid technology leadership versus just being specialized on how effective they are with AI as leaders.
So I have a rather reductionist view of this stuff. I'll be honest with you, whenever new technology comes out, I go, okay, cool, what couldn't I do before that I can do now? And what wasn't a problem then, that is a problem for me now. And you look at this with blockchain, and you look at this with, whatever catches the zeitgeist at the moment, where 0.30, quick, things like that. I think you're going to see that. Look, LLMs are reaching the point where we are exponentially, LLMs are going exponentially larger. The results that they produce are incrementally getting better. That is not a good paradigm for new technology, to be honest with you. We are reaching a point where I think, and already we are talking about token optimization, the cost we are talking about, and especially in production environments, the things that we are talking about really are the same stuff we talked about with any production environment, which is, how much does it cost? What's the response time? What's the uptime? I'm not paying tokens because I cannot forecast that. It has to be running on something like Bedrock, or it has to be running on this. And is this LLM good enough for what I need in my production environment? And I think you're going to reach that point anyway. LLMs have been a seismic shift. Will large concept models come along or something else, that'll be a seismic shift? Probably. But like right now, I think we're reaching that point where people are understanding what LLMs can and can't do and where those slot in. And I think at that point, we'll be back to talking about technology.
Hui, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that I agree with Alex's aspect. I'll tell you, and I'll tell you whether we disagree. I think foundationally, I think, you need the fundamentals, you need curiosity, you need a leadership. Those things we need it today, and we need it yesterday. We need it more today, actually. So that's what I would say. So that has been invariant, if I call it. And then now I do believe AI is a fundamental shifting. I think both on the industry and the society. It's a much bigger force. I think in every innovation cycle, we talk about innovation cycles, whether it's a PC, whether it's the internet, whether it's mobile. I think the one way to think about that, as someone said it, is that we always overestimate how much difference it can make in the short term. That's what the hype cycle Alex is talking about. We'll say, oh, tomorrow everything will change. Well, we're a little bit too optimistic. However, we usually tremendous underestimate what can change in 5-year cycles. I think that if you think about in every technology cycle, people cannot imagine. My kids, do not, even know how to read a map. They absolutely have, they have no idea, whether they need to drive a car. So this massive society changes. I think AI will have massive society changes that we cannot even anticipate. And that's already, we're adapting to that world. Now, the question here, what's going to happen in 3 years? I think that's very, very difficult to tell. However, I think, again, if you look at even that 4 roles, one is you need to fundamentally control the business outcome. Second is someone needs to continue to deliver value, like Alex said, that's IC. And then people need to continue to lead people, that's their code. And ultimately, I think what the AI introduced is that, AI is, non-deterministic, it hallucinates. It will continue to have a lot of automation means there's a lot of mistakes. And in the deeper level mistakes, you need deep experts to inspect and validate. So I think that those are the skeleton, what I think the changes, it's already happening. It seems like it will continue down the road. Additional changes, don't know yet.
Gotcha. Right. Well, I definitely appreciate both of your thoughts on those questions. And now I've taken out the Ninja Turtle screen, which means it is now time for Questionable Ideas, our tabletop exercise where our panelists will serve as interim executives at a fictional company called Questionable Ideas. These scenarios are not shared in advance with our guests, and while certain details may sound a bit over the top, they do reflect on today's topic. The panelists are not responsible for the presence of goblins, gremlins, or kobolds in these scenarios. As usual, that is entirely my fault. So again, ground rules, gentlemen, you'll be interim executives with this fictional company. You'll have the same rights, powers, and privileges that you expected to have. And if you need to call in additional outside of the box kind of resources to help with these scenarios too, because again, you're dealing with some things that are going to be a bit out of control. Sound good? Ready? Okay, great. All right, first scenario. The house always wins. The chairman of Questionable Ideas wants to ensure the company thrives and wants to build a plan so the current leadership's tech skills and will adapt for the future. The kobolds step up first. They've built a database filled with technical knowledge of all current coding skills, security responses, understanding of operating systems that stretch back to DOS and GNOME. This will combine CIOs, CTOs, chief AI officers, and chief data officers into one amalgamated digital presence. They just need everyone in tech leadership to wear biometric devices around the clock, even in personal time, to track their behaviors and reactions in order to help train a quantum-powered AI that they call Mr. House. There will be no separate disciplines, just one tech leader who will learn from this knowledge center, but mostly to give a human face to Mr. House's decisions. Do you keep this plan? Do you modify it? Or do you shut it down and start over?
I know my answer. I also know Alex's answer.
Please.
So I will fire the guy who proposed the idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, the guy who proposed the dystopian hellscape, yeah, maybe probably not the best guy to be making decisions for leadership capacities. Yeah.
Right. Alex, we're agreeing, right? I can.
Oh, absolutely. Like bonkers. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Any thoughts in terms of like the idea of having kind of like an amalgamated knowledge base for organizations to help kind of train the future leaders and your tech leaders within your organization?
I once had an interesting a guy. She's quite famous in the agile space, but he was an interesting guy, and we used to talk about documentation, and he was quite a bombastic gentleman, and he would slam the hand down on the table and say, "Documentation is a tax." Like you have to find ways of institutionalizing knowledge in ways that don't require constant updates, because as soon as you write anything down from a living, breathing document, you have to keep that document alive, and that's a tax. And you see that kind of interestingly, like with infrastructure as code. So before infrastructure as code, you used to go into a gentleman's office, and there'd be on the wall this massive printout of the network. It would be this huge thing, and there'll be pen marks all over it because it'll change. And then infrastructure as code came along and fundamentally shifted that, which was like, hey, I know what my deployment environment looks like. Why? Because it's entirely infrastructure as code, right? And that's sort of what he's alluding to. And so when you think about training, if I'm having to manually train, if I'm having to manually set up these documents, there is something that's siloed that's not quite right. So generally when I look at these things, I try and understand why we're having to do this and where that shared ownership and knowledge is not being It's not happening. I mean, and you see that in siloed Slack channels, right? Everyone's got their own Slack channel, right? And so no one really knows what everyone else is doing. So you have to start. So there are all sorts of things in the culture and the zeitgeist that you kind of need to tinker with to solve those sorts of issues. And I tend to try and do those first before I go for the idea of, hey, let's build a monolith of dystopian future with a quantum AI that has to hang around my neck like a noose. Is generally where I would go first.
I think that let's take a concrete example. Andre Kapasi, right? So it's a leader in AI. I think he's a very pragmatic person, also visionary, and he built a personal wiki. It's a knowledge base for himself, and again, it's in the spirit of Alex saying it has to be self-maintainable, right? Because if you don't maintain it, otherwise, it's not useful. So I think that this concept of some kind of intelligent knowledge base for a person and for organization, I think it makes sense. Now, it's not a panacea. It just is a major step forward. It's another resource for the individual and for the organization. Now, I don't believe there is because you frame it as if this is going to replace a leader. It's going to be a leadership training. For me, leadership is different from knowledge, right? The reason I say there's a knowledge base, I think that is helping humans to sort of make decisions faster, find things, learn faster. So all of those things make sense. However, leadership is leadership. I think the leadership, as I mentioned before, in this new AI age, is even more critical. It's a human-specific attributes. I think that it's not AI. It's not an AI domain. So that's my first point. And the second is, I think even individual-wise, I think it's not leadership is not just about leaders. It's not about your C title people. Everybody has leadership. I think all the ICs need to have great leadership. And I think in this AI age, even more so, it's more demanding, if I say, or more opportunities for every individual to do so much more. That's what the liberating part of the AI is, that everybody can do more. However, you need to have the intrinsic capabilities to learn, the high slope. And I go back to what Alex said, the curiosity. I'm a big fan of curiosity, and that's a human innate aspect of it. And people with the curiosity, with the empathy, with the ability to learn, and also ability to lead, we need more of them at every level. And that's not going to be trained by AI. That's a human dimension.
Okay, well done on that. All right, next scenario, the host network. The Goblins wanted to introduce a different succession plan. Well, it's more of a bolt-on update to the plan that you just heard. Rather than elevate one individual to serve as the de facto tech leader, the entire company will be connected to a leadership host network that will oversee the actions of people via chips that are embedded into everyone's brain. If and when the leadership network decides that it needs to act in the real world, the AI will assume control of an available host body, a volunteer, to serve in that role until the task is complete. And for the sake of security and compliance, that volunteer's memories will be wiped after they are done. So should we keep this plan, modify it, or start over from scratch?
I mean, this is just Severance with a even more dystopian twist, I assume. I mean, like, I get the funny aspects on some of this sort of stuff. I will say, like, I want to put out something very left field, right? But to think about, which is LLMs are trained on public knowledge, and they tend towards the middle. They tend towards the mean. In fact, that's what they are. They're a pattern matching that navigates towards the mean. Now, in certain things in highly structured environments, such as coding, that's why they're pretty good, because the mean's pretty good. The thing that was touched on before, which is curiosity, is understanding what the mean is and then understanding the way that's different from that. If everyone else is using an LLM to make decisions, knowing that gives you a tremendous advantage if you're curious enough to not tend towards the mean. And so I think what I would say to you guys is in this dystopian future where goblins and kobolds somehow mastered quantum computing and brain implants and host networks in some sort of like Borg type severance package. Understanding where the mean is and going the opposite direction might be what defines the next $1 trillion company, rather than doing what the LLM tells you. Understanding what the LLM tells you is important. Taking that context is important. Allowing it to make that decision, maybe not so important. That's not where the black swan will be. It's probably where the white swans are. In fact, by definition, it is where the white swans are. It is what I would say to that. Or you can go the Borg route. I mean, like if it's the chip in your brain, you wouldn't be able to protest anyway. I mean, like you only got to time down once, right? So, you know.
Yeah, JP, again, I the way I frame it that way, I know this is meant to be, funny and extreme, but I think that ultimately, if we talk about what's really the positive statement is, AI will be amazing. It will get, as I said, it will done things we couldn't even imagine today. It will continue to improve. However, so is human. Human, we have the amazing abilities. There's so much potential we haven't unleashed yet. Every new tool enables us to unleash our new capabilities. I think AI, one is we need to continue to be human, and then be best what we do. And the second is it will use AI to unleash our powerful potential. AI, not let AI to displace us. First of all, it should not be a goal. Second, is a stupid goal. It's not helping.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Well done on that. And last scenario, and we'll wrap this up. All right. The quest for foresight. The Gremlins have come up with their own plan to prepare future tech leaders within the organization. They propose a Burning Man style retreat in the desert where candidates will meditate, work on team building, and then develop competing tech projects, which will all be incinerated. Then the candidates will be given sticks and stones to battle to the finish. Because if they can't work with Stone Age tech, how can they lead the future of the company? And also, isn't an aggressive strategy more important in a future where AI can do the heavy lifting on technical knowledge anyway? Again, if you follow through with this plan, modify it, or just start over from scratch.
Is it me again? I mean, look, fundamentally, nothing's changed from a company perspective. You create something that derives value. You solve a pain for a customer, something that's so painful that they're willing to spend money on it. That's doesn't matter if you use AI or not. AI allows you to get there, and I would say, at least with this one, there is the aspect of understanding if it helps you derive what the problem that you're fixing is for those customers, then great. The rest of it's like hyperbole, right? But like that fundamentally hasn't changed. And in fact, if you're thinking about technology before you're thinking about the problem you're solving, you are doing it wrong. Look, people buy tech. I buy tech. I'm a nerd. Very few companies buy tech. They buy solutions to problems, and it happens to use particular technology. If you're a company that your company sells a solution, you should focus on what that solution is, and if there's value for your customers there, and then how you then create that solution. I honestly think there are very few companies out there who care if you use AI or if you use a million monkeys on a space station orbiting Jupiter. I would strongly suggest anyone who wants to go to Burning Man to meditate on what the future of their company should be, should not worry about using Stone Age tech or LLMs, and should worry about, hey, what is the biggest problems that we can make money by solving are? And that's what I would point to. Apart from that, Burning Man's a much more interesting dystopian hellscape than the quasi-quantum Borg hellscape that you mentioned earlier. So maybe that's the lesser of the three evils. So there you go.
I think, again, I separate, leadership and human development from, understanding the technology and building the business plan. So I think that if we want to build a offsite and a retreat, the goal is to, really build the human bonds, understand how we solve problems together, whether in the AI age or before AI age. I think that, the exercise you propose is a fine wine. It's nothing to do with AI.
Gotcha. All right. Gentlemen, appreciate you getting through the questionable ideas scenarios. Listen, Hui, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. You've been very insightful. I appreciate your thoughts.
Very nice. You know what? I think that's that card that you hold up. I think that's from the original run of Turtles when it was an independent comic. And if it was, then kudos to you for it, because it's nice to see. They recently re-released them. IDW did. So they...
Indeed.
I'm showing my age because I actually remember them the first time round. So there you
go. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, GP.
It was a pleasure, guys. So.